Hi, I'm Michael Vertolli, and I'd like to welcome you to our Living Earth online lecture series. This lecture series is based on a series of lectures that I used to give back in the 1990s, and it was a very popular series because over the course of a short lecture, what we're able to do is do a focused talk on some very relevant subjects that are things that people are interested in their day-to-day lives, and cover them in enough detail to give people enough tools to be able to work with things a little bit with herbs and other things in helping to boost their immune system or whatever the topic happens to be. In this introductory lecture, what I would like to do is provide a little bit of context to these lectures, putting them into a bit of a broader perspective so that I can cover certain things that don't have to then be repeated in every single lecture, because they tend to run through as a common thread in all of these subjects that have to do with healing. So what we're going to talk a little bit about here, herbs are going to be the main focus of these talks, but not always the exclusive focus, because if we're looking at something like boosting our immune system, I might discuss things like vitamin supplements that might be useful as well. But the herbal aspect of the talk is going to be, in most cases, the main focus. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about healing and using herbs and what their role is in the healing process. When we think about using herbs for healing, sometimes it's difficult to get out of our modern paradigm, our modern medical context, because that's something that we've all been raised with most of our lives. And that is this idea that, first of all, diseases are, for instance, a bunch of symptoms, and that they're bad, and there's something that we have to get rid of, and we're looking for some kind of a magic bullet in the form of a drug or something like that in order to eliminate the symptoms so that we can get on with our lives. But in a more holistic and traditional point of view or paradigm, we don't look at things in that way. There are no magic bullets. And in many cases, a lot of the way that herbs are portrayed in the media are in that same modern medical reductionistic paradigm. That is, instead people are coming from a perspective of instead of looking for a drug, which in some contexts people now perceive as being negative or synthetic or somehow unnatural, what they're looking to do is to find some kind of an herb which will replace it. So I've got a symptom, I've got insomnia, so I don't want to take Valium, I would rather take some herb. But herbs are really not meant to be used in that way, although I realize that in the retail market, in many ways, in some cases, replacing a drug with an herb or a vitamin or something like that can in some cases be a little bit of an improvement, because at least we're working with something that's natural and has less side effects, etc. But what we forget is that in the context of healing, it's not simply a matter of looking at the surface of things, looking at individual symptoms and taking something to get rid of them so that we can go on with the way that we've been living. In many situations, in fact most of the time when we are ill, it's an indication that in some ways our life is out of balance. And it's not a matter of simply taking something so that we can continue to function the way we have before. It's an opportunity to look at our life and say, how is our life out of balance so that it's manifesting in this way? So in using herbs and other natural remedies or modalities for that matter, we have to always keep that in mind, that there are two sides of the coin. When our life gets out of balance so that we're manifesting certain symptoms or illnesses, however you want to look at it, we have to keep in mind that that is, in some sense, just signs and symptoms of what's going on in our life as a whole. And we have to realize that these signs and symptoms are a product of what we eat, how we live, how much exercise we get, how we think, how we feel, the attitude that we bring to life, the way that we view our life and the way that we live in the world. All of these things come into play. So when our life gets sufficiently out of balance, it's very important to have natural healing, natural remedies, tools like herbs, which can help support us in that healing process. But we have to realize that on the other side of the coin is recognizing that it's necessary for us to scrutinize our lives a little bit and look at how we're living and what we need to do to bring our life back into balance. And that's really important, and it's something that needs to be stressed. And I will certainly mention this in brief in the context of all of these lectures, but it's something that I don't want to have to go into a lot of detail, so we're laying out that context here. Herbs are incredibly valuable healing tools. Having worked with them all my life, and both in the context of healing in my own life, as well as in the context of working and living and being a healer, being a teacher, and helping other people to use them. I've never ceases to amaze me the depth of the healing that can come from working with herbs. And the greater the level of depth with which we engage them, the greater and the deeper the healing that can be obtained. But it's, as I said, it's important to realize that we really need to look at all of those aspects of our lives that come into play and that have the potential to bring us out of balance. In the context of traditional teachings, and I guess to some degree in science, although scientists are still very, very far behind a lot of the traditional understanding that has existed through millennia in traditional cultures, in terms of understanding that this modern worldview that each of us is an island, each of us is an individual, is largely an illusion, and that we all live in a certain context. I don't live in isolation in opposition to the world around me. I live in a context. I live within a family. I live within a community. I live within a society. And I live within the context of the ecosystem of the natural world. And all of these things are interconnected. So in traditional cultures, for instance, if one person in a tribe was sick, they perceived it as being the whole tribe was ill on some level or out of balance. They recognized that this was a community affair. It wasn't just about the individual. So in terms of looking at things in this broader scale, in this broader context, we have to keep that in mind, that we live within a context. And to some degree, if we live in a society that's out of balance, if we live in a family that's out of balance, if we live in an environment or an ecosystem that's out of balance, to some degree, our healing can never be complete in the context of what we can do for ourselves as an individual. But nevertheless, we still have choices. There are things that we can do. There are things that we can do in the way that we live, in the choices of the foods that we eat, in the choices of how I choose to live in the world. Am I going to buy into the rat race that says I've got to be accessible and work around the clock and be open to receiving millions of emails and text messages and be on call for work 24/7? Am I going to buy into that just so I can buy lots of junk? We really have to, in our society, get into touch with what's really valuable, what really, to prioritize what really matters in life, which is a good relationship to ourself, our good relationship to our food, to our family, to our friends, to our community, and to the natural world that we live in. That's what really matters. And in order to be able to do that, in order to be able to engage with our life and with the world in that way, we have to open a space for it. And if we're spending all of our time working and working and working and working in order to buy lots of stuff, to buy into that materialistic paradigm that says that happiness comes from owning lots of junk, then we're never going to be in balance. So there are things that we can do in our day-to-day life, not just in terms of choosing to eat food because it's good for us, but because it's good for the world. It's good for our community. We buy food that supports local farmers, that family-run farms, not big mega corporate farms, but real people that are doing their best to live in a natural way, in a way that we've lived for generations. We can buy organic, and in doing so, we're supporting people that are growing food in a certain way, which because that's what they value. They want to grow food in a way that is more in harmony with the natural world that we live in. And not only are we supporting people in our community that are making these kinds of choices and helping them to do that, because unfortunately in the world that we live in, the currency of energy of exchange is money. And of course, in order for people to be able to make those choices and to live and work that way, they need the support of their community. But we're also, when we make that choice to buy organic food, we're not only buying food that's better for ourselves and supporting people that are making, that are trying to live and work in a way that's better for the world, but we are helping to have less of a negative footprint on the natural world. So in all of these choices that we make, we have this opportunity not only to choose to do things that facilitate our own healing process, but contribute to the healing of our community and to the healing of the natural world. And in many cases, I mean, as we know, the natural world, our Earth Mother, has the capacity to heal herself. But what we need to do, similar to in our own context, if I want to heal my body, one of the things I have to do is stop doing the things that cause me to be out of balance. Similarly, in order for nature to heal herself, which of course she has the capacity to do, we have to do our best as individuals and as a society to stop impacting nature in negative ways. So what I'm getting at here is that in those choices that we make in our day-to-day life, that healing is a much bigger thing than me getting rid of some symptoms or getting rid of some disease. It's about coming back into balance. It's about learning how to live in a way that is in harmony, in a way that in many ways we were meant to live. Because for me to heal, I have to be living within the context of a society, a community, and a natural world that can support that. So in our society, we do have, obviously there are certain things that we don't have a lot of control over. But one of the interesting things about the capitalistic world is that one of the most powerful tools that we actually have in order to make change is in terms of how we spend our money. Because money is the currency of energy exchange in our society. So when I choose to spend money on buying something that's good for me and good for my community and good for the natural world, what I am doing is I'm creating a market for something. So money isn't necessarily always evil, although this obsession with living and owning and having more and increasing profit margins, of course, it's an example of something that's simply a currency of energy exchange, and taking it out of context or taking it, using it in a way that's out of balance. It can be used in ways that promote the healing of myself and my community and the natural world. So the choices that we make day to day are very, very important. And, I can't, if I view myself as an island and approach this selfishly, like I'm going to take, buy these herbs, I'm going to buy these vitamins, I'm going to take these things, and I'm going to heal myself, but I'm not considering the fact that I am not an island, that I am not someone who's isolated, but I'm part of this intricate, connecting web of life and web of community. That is really, really an important understanding, that our personal healing requires us to look at that broader context and consider what are the effects of our actions on the world around us, on the people that we interact with day to day, on the earth, on, as they say in Native American traditions, on the next 7 generations. How is it that how I'm living now is going to affect the lives of my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren? This is really, really important to keep in mind. And I could easily spend the first half hour of every lecture talking about that, because it's something that is not part of the paradigm of the dominant society that we live in. It's something that we don't hear every day, and that we need to hear more and more on a regular basis to remind ourselves, because we live, through a series of patterns that we have repeated over and over and over again in our lives, it's very difficult to make that change. It's actually not difficult to live a healthy lifestyle and to live in a way that has a greater positive impact on the people in the world around us. What is difficult is making that change, breaking out of the patterns that we have, that we repeat in an unconscious way on a day-to-day basis, stopping and thinking, do I really need this? Do I need that? Do I really need to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week and not have any time to just be and to be silent and to be with myself and to be in my body instead of in my head? These are the things that really matter, and we need to make those conscious choices to live more simply, to live in a way that's more in greater harmony with the world around us. And that is a very critical part of our healing process. All healing comes from nature, and our relationship with nature, and nature includes our own body and the people around us, because we are all part of nature. And all of that healing comes from there. And if we don't foster a deeper and more harmonious connection with nature, we can only heal ourselves up to a point. To a large extent, that we might feel a little better than we did before, but to a large extent that is simply a superficial way of dealing with things, and inevitably things will gradually catch up with us. And although I might not have this rash on my arm that I used to have, I still don't have that sense of healing, that sense of health and well-being and happiness and centeredness and calm and peacefulness in my day-to-day life, which is part of the process. It's not just about the physical symptoms that I'm experiencing. It's about being at peace within myself and within the world that I live in. So I wanted to just lay this context and keep that in mind, because in the course of these short lectures, this is not something, it's something I can mention in brief, but it's not something that I can, without turning them into 2, 3, 4 hour lectures, repeat over and over again. I'd actually strongly recommend, and I will probably mention it in the course of these lectures, to go back and to listen to this introductory lecture every once in a while, and I'll offer little reminders of that this is not about magic bullets. It's not about what can this herb do for me in order to eliminate these symptoms. It's about completely changing the way we live, and that begins with the way we actually view the world and our understanding of how we interact in the world, how we view the world, what we bring to each experience that we have each moment in terms of our level of awareness. And of course, being in our body, because our body has a language of its own. It tells us what it needs. But most of our time, we're in our heads. And that's not a judgment. That's just the way it is, because in our society, that worldview, what our society rewards is for us to nourish and to develop our mental capacity at the expense of our heart, of our emotions, of our physical beingness, and of our connectedness to things. We foster a worldview that views us as individuals in opposition to the world, whose goal in life is to accumulate things for our own personal well-being without considering the impact of that, of the other people and the natural world around us, all those beautiful beings, the animals and plants and other beings that we share this life with. So I wanted to place that in that context and bring that concept to the fore, because it's a very, very important aspect of the healing process that goes above and beyond what herb can I use for this, even if I have a deeper understanding of how to utilize herbs to work in a more, at a level of greater depth, to get to some of the root issues in terms of our organ functioning and providing support for organs, or talking about diet and what are better foods to nourish ourselves and to support that healing process. It's always important to keep that in mind. If we view healing as an individual process, then to a large extent, we're missing the boat. We're only addressing one side of the coin, and that is out of balance. We have to learn to address all aspects of that interconnectedness of our life, that all parts of us, I as a not just a mental being, but as a physical being, as an emotional being, as a family being, as a social being, as a member of the global ecological community, and to recognize that all of these, that everything is interconnected, and until we as individuals expand our awareness and our way of looking at things, we can never truly be healed. So I wanted to just put that out there and as food for thought. And of course, maybe at some point down the road we'll actually do a lecture topic that goes into this in greater depth. But it's important to keep that in mind as we talk about more day-to-day, three-dimensional stuff that we can relate to a little more, like what food we put into our body, what vitamins we take, or what herbs we use, to always keep that bigger picture in mind, because that's really what the healing process is all about. So on that note, for all of you, there's going to be a whole series of lectures. Some you might be interested in, some you might not be, but I hope you enjoy these lectures. And for each lecture, we're going to set up an online forum, just like we do with other online classes, and we invite you to ask questions. If you have any questions about some of the details covered, to please ask them on the forum, so that everybody that views the lecture has the opportunity to see your questions and to see the answer, and everybody has the benefit, just as if you were here present at the lecture and could ask questions and everybody could hear everybody's questions. It's a bit of a limitation not having that immediacy that we have in that context where we're all physically present, but still it's an important tool that we can use so that we can all learn from each other. And that's all I have to say at this point, and I hope that you enjoy these lectures.